The dining room at Hargrove Estate smelled like gardenias and money. My daughter had insisted on renting the private hall for what she called an intimate celebration dinner, 47 guests, 3 servers, a string quartet tucked into the corner. I wore the sapphire blue dress I'd kept in the cedar closet since my 62nd birthday. My late husband Raymond always said it made me look like someone who didn't need anyone's permission. I sat at the long mahogany table, hands folded, watching my daughter-in-law move through the room like she was already the hostess of a house she didn't own. She was wrong about that, about most things actually. She just didn't know it yet. My son-in-law Marcus leaned toward her and whispered something. She laughed, too loud, the way people laugh when they want a room to turn and look. Then she straightened, smoothed her dress, and picked up her fork like a gavel. "Before we start the main course," she said, her voice carrying easily over the quartet, "I'd like to say a few words." The room settled. I lifted my water glass. "Margaret," she said, turning to face me from 4 seats down the table. "I think it's time we were all honest." Her smile stayed exactly where it was, painted and practiced. "You've been a lovely mother-in-law in theory. But in practice?" She tilted her head like she was explaining something to a child. "You've been a weight around this family's neck for 3 years, and frankly, the rest of us are tired of pretending otherwise." The string quartet faltered. One of my grandchildren set down a bread roll. I looked at her. Just looked. The way you look at a storm you saw coming from 2 counties away. "We've made a decision," she continued, glancing at my daughter. My daughter, Carol, who sat perfectly still and did not meet my eyes. "The house on Birchwood Lane is going to be listed, and the proceeds, well, they belong to the family, to the future, not to the past." I set my water glass down with the softest possible sound, and then I smiled. I turned to the man standing near the service entrance, a quiet, bespectacled man named Walter Briggs, who had been my family's attorney for 29 years, and I gave him a single small nod. He reached for his briefcase. They had no idea I had spent the last 8 months preparing for exactly this moment. Raymond died on a Wednesday in March, 2 years ago now. The forsythia had just started blooming along the back fence, and I remember thinking that was wrong somehow, that something so bright had no business showing up on a day like that. He'd been sick for 14 months. We had time to say everything that needed saying. When he finally let go, his face was calm, and I was holding his hand, and the room smelled like the eucalyptus candle his sister had brought from Portland. I wore black for 6 weeks. Then I went back to tending the garden because Raymond always said grief needs somewhere to go, and dirt is honest about receiving it. The house on Birchwood Lane was paid off. Raymond had made sure of that. He was a methodical man, an engineer for 34 years, the kind of person who kept a file for everything and never let a document expire. The week before he died, he sat up in bed and said, "Margaret, promise me you'll call Walter if anything feels wrong." I promised. I didn't know then how much I'd need to keep it. My daughter Carol had always been the practical one. Sharp mind, organized, the kind of woman who made color-coded grocery lists and kept a calendar updated to the hour. For a long time I admired it. Then I watched it curdle into something else. She had married Marcus Chen 8 years ago, in a ceremony at a vineyard in Virginia that cost more than my first car. I liked Marcus well enough at first. He was pleasant at holidays, remembered my birthday, fixed the gutter one Thanksgiving without being asked. But Marcus's business had started failing 18 months after Raymond died. Import consulting, he called it. I never fully understood it, and apparently neither did his clients, because by the time the second winter came, he was spending long afternoons in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, and talking about opportunity. "Real estate is the only real asset," he told me once, stirring a spoon through a mug he hadn't drunk from. "Everything else is just paper." I said, I'd learned that from Raymond. When someone is talking themselves into something, silence is the most honest response. Carol started coming with him after that. At first, it was pleasant. Sunday lunches, the grandchildren running through the backyard, the old normalcy of a full house. Raymond's absence still sat in every room like furniture rearranged too recently, but the noise helped. Then the suggestions started. "Mom, have you thought about downsizing?" Carol said one Sunday, loading the dishwasher without being asked, which in our family had always meant someone wanted something. "This house is a lot for one person." "I manage fine," I said. "Of course you do. But financially, it just seems— the property taxes alone, and the upkeep." She closed the dishwasher and turned around, and her face was doing something careful. "Marcus looked into some numbers. The equity in this place is significant. If you were to access some of it, we could make sure you're comfortable, and honestly, the family could use a cushion right now." I looked at my daughter. The daughter I had taught to read, driven to swim practice at 6 in the morning for 4 years, sat beside in a hospital room when she had her miscarriage at 28. I looked at her and I thought, "Not yet. I am not ready to know what this is yet. Let me think about it," I said. I thought about it, and then I called Walter Briggs. It was Walter who told me to be careful. Not dramatic, not yet just careful. He said, "Margaret, don't sign anything. Don't let anyone tell you it's routine. And pay attention to what comes in the mail." I started paying attention. The first thing I noticed was the forwarded address form, a small card, pre-filled, tucked into a stack of mail my daughter had brought over after one of her visits. She said the post office had sent it by mistake. I looked at the handwriting, and I recognized Carol's slant the way she makes her sevens with a sharp European cross. I said nothing. I kept the card. The second thing was the phone call I overheard from the back porch. I had come in through the garden door while Carol and Marcus were in the kitchen, thinking I was still at my neighbor Beverly's. Marcus was saying, "Just needs to sign one more document. The notary doesn't ask questions if the paperwork's clean." Carol said something I couldn't fully hear. Then Marcus said, "She trusts you. That's the whole thing. She trusts you." I stood in the garden door with my hand on the frame for a long moment. Then I went inside and made tea and set out 3 cups and said nothing at all. That night I called Walter again. He said, "It's time to look closer." He helped me pull my credit report. There it was, a home equity line of credit, opened 6 weeks earlier, $40,000, my name on the application. My signature at the bottom, slightly shaky in a way mine never is. I have my mother's steady hands. I sat at the kitchen table until 11 o'clock that night. The refrigerator hummed. The forsythia outside tapped against the window glass. I thought about Raymond saying, "Call Walter if anything feels wrong." I thought about Carol at 8 years old, tucked against my side during thunderstorms. I thought, you can love someone completely and still not hand them everything you built. Walter referred me to a forensic document specialist named Dr. Patel, a quiet woman who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and looked at the signature for approximately 40 seconds before saying, "This is a close forgery. Good, but not perfect. The pressure points are wrong." She printed me a 3-page report. I put it in a green folder in the back of my filing cabinet, behind Raymond's old tax returns, where no one would think to look. After that, I moved slowly on purpose. I let Carol bring Marcus over on Sundays. I let them talk about real estate values and market timing. I asked gentle questions. What kind of timeline were they thinking? What would the process look like? Wasn't it complicated to manage a property remotely? And I watched Marcus's confidence grow the way mold grows when you keep the conditions warm and don't disturb it. I visited my attorney's office every 2 weeks. We built the case the way Raymond used to build anything, one verified piece at a time, nothing loose, nothing assumed. Walter found 3 additional documents bearing my signature that I had never signed: a consent form for a title transfer, a letter to the bank waiving certain notification rights, a healthcare proxy update naming Carol as sole decision-maker and removing the clause Raymond and I had written together, the one that required 2 signatures before any major financial decision could be made on my behalf. I looked at that last one for a long time. Then I revised my will. Raymond and I had always planned to leave the house to Carol, with a trust structure to protect the grandchildren's interests. I loved that plan. I had imagined it for years. Carol coming home to the Birchwood house someday, the grandchildren finding the same windowsill where I used to read, the garden still there in some form. I let that image go on a Tuesday afternoon in November. It hurt the way amputations hurt, I imagine, cleanly, completely, all at once. The house would go to the Millbrook Community Land Trust, a nonprofit that turned donated properties into permanently affordable family housing. Raymond had served on their advisory board for 11 years. He would have approved. The financial accounts would fund a scholarship at the community college, where I had taught English literature for 22 years, 2 awards annually, for students who were first generation and over 40. Raymond would have approved of that too. I signed everything in Walter's office with Dr. Patel as a witness and had it notarized before I put my coat back on. Then I called my daughter to confirm I was coming to the celebration dinner. Carol had organized the evening as a family gathering, a toast, she said, to new beginnings, to getting the finances in order, to the family's future. Those were her words, getting the finances in order. As if Raymond's life's work was a ledger that needed balancing by someone else's hand. I said I was looking forward to it. I asked if it would be all right to have Walter attend as a guest. He was practically family, I said. He and Raymond had been friends for 30 years. Carol hesitated for just a moment. Then she said, "Of course, Mom. The more the merrier." I hung up and looked out the window at the forsythia, bare now in December. I slept well that night, which surprised me. I had expected to lie awake with the old grief and the new one. But I think my body understood something my mind was still catching up to, that this was not an ending, that I was not the one being erased. The night of the dinner, I arrived exactly on time. I sat where Carol placed me, near the center of the table, between my grandson Owen and a family friend I'd known for 20 years. Walter was seated near the service entrance, per my request, with a clear sightline to the whole room. The meal was excellent. Carol had chosen a menu Raymond would have liked: roast chicken, wild rice, a soup with leeks and cream. I ate slowly and spoke to Owen about his robotics club and told the family friend about the new rose variety I was trying in the spring bed. Everything was ordinary. Everything was warm. When Marcus stood to give a toast, I lifted my glass with everyone else. "To family," he said, looking at me with a smile I now understood completely, "and to the future." "To the future," I said. Then Carol stood. She spoke for several minutes about how much this gathering meant, about Raymond's memory, about how the right decision is sometimes the hard one, about how the best gift a parent can give is trust. Her voice was beautiful. She had always been a precise and persuasive speaker. I noticed 2 guests nodding along. "Mom," she said, turning to me, "we have a few documents we'd like to go over tonight. Just some estate planning updates, very simple, that we think will make things easier for everyone. Marcus has them ready." She smiled, open and certain. "We just need your signature." I looked at my daughter, and I said, "Of course." I waited one breath. "But first, I've prepared something, a small presentation, for the family." I looked toward Walter and nodded. He opened his briefcase. I thought, "Since we're all together," I said, settling back in my chair, this would be the right moment to share some updates of my own. Walter rose from his seat and walked to the front of the room. 46 people watched him. Marcus was very still. Carol's smile began its slow rearrangement. "My name is Walter Briggs," he said, voice steady, as a man who has delivered difficult news before and knows the value of plain language. "I've served as Margaret's attorney for 29 years. And I was a close personal friend of her late husband, Raymond. I'm here tonight because Mrs. Margaret Wells asked me to be." He opened a slim folder. "Over the past 8 months, we have documented the following: 3 instances of forged signatures on financial and legal documents, each bearing Mrs. Wells's name, none signed by her. A fraudulent home equity line of credit opened in her name without her knowledge or consent, totaling $40,000. 2 title transfer documents that, if processed, would have conveyed her property at Birchwood Lane to Marcus and Carol Chen without Mrs. Wells's informed agreement. The room was absolutely quiet. Someone's fork rested against a plate with a soft sound that seemed very loud. We have shared this documentation with the County District Attorney's Office, the State Bar's Fraud Division, and the lending institution that processed the equity application. Those processes are underway. Carol said my name. Her voice was different now, the precision still there, but shaking underneath. I looked at her. My daughter, the 8-year-old in the thunderstorm. I said, "Let me finish." I stood. "I have spent 63 years building a life," I said. "I taught other people's children how to love language. I raised a daughter I was proud of. I sat beside a good man while he died, and I promised him I would be all right." My voice did not shake. I had practiced this part in my kitchen 3 times over 2 weeks, and also I meant every word, which helps. I am not a set of assets. I am not a problem to be managed. I am not past my usefulness to the people who were supposed to love me. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at the table. I looked at Carol. She was looking at me, and whatever expression she had planned for this evening had left her face entirely, and what was underneath it was harder to read. "The house on Birchwood Lane," I said, "has been transferred by me, willingly, with full legal documentation to the Millbrook Community Land Trust. Raymond's accounts are directing a scholarship fund at Eastfield Community College. Walter has certified copies for anyone who would like to review them." I smoothed the front of my dress. "The documents you brought tonight, Carol, are not ones I'll be signing. Not tonight. Not ever." I picked up my water glass, took a small sip, and set it back down. "Now, would anyone like dessert? I'm told they've made Raymond's favorite, lemon pound cake." They left before the cake was served. Marcus walked quickly. Carol paused at the door and turned back. And for a moment, I thought she might say something that would matter. But she only looked at me with an expression I didn't have a name for, and then she was gone. Beverly, who had been at the table the whole time, and whom I had told exactly nothing in advance, appeared at my elbow with a slice of lemon pound cake and said simply, "Good." I laughed. It surprised me. In the weeks that followed, the legal processes moved forward without my having to do very much. Walter managed the paperwork with the precision of a man who had been waiting 30 years for a case this clean. The fraudulent equity line was flagged and frozen. The bank opened its own investigation. The forged documents were submitted to the district attorney's office, and by February, Carol and Marcus had retained their own attorney. I changed the locks on Birchwood Lane on a Tuesday, which felt right. I began going through Raymond's study not to clear it out, but because I finally had the stillness to do it properly. I found boxes of photographs I hadn't seen in years, letters he'd kept, a notebook where he'd written down things he wanted to remember. I sat in his chair and read for 3 hours and cried in the good way, the way where the grief is clean and doesn't pretend to be anything else. Beverly came over twice a week. My former colleague Diane from the English department started calling on Sunday evenings. My grandson Owen texted me a photograph of his robotics team holding a trophy with the caption, "We won, show Grandma." I called him immediately. In March, when the forsythia came back, I stood in the garden and looked at it for a long time. Same blooms as the year Raymond died. Same yellow, same reckless timing, but it looked different to me now. Not wrong, the way it had the year before. Just persistent. Just alive. I kept the house. Or rather, I chose to give it away, which is not the same as having it taken. The difference is everything. I planted dahlias along the back fence, which Raymond never let me do because he thought they were too dramatic. He was right. They were wonderful. One evening in April, a letter arrived. Carol's handwriting on the envelope, careful and familiar. I stood in the kitchen holding it for a long moment before I opened it. She wrote that she was sorry. 4 paragraphs, precise and organized. The way she wrote everything but something in the middle of the second paragraph broke from that, went jagged, and I could see the place where she'd started crying. She said Raymond would have been ashamed of her. She said she was ashamed of herself. She said she didn't expect anything from me, only wanted me to know. I read the letter twice. I put it in the filing cabinet, behind Raymond's old tax returns, in the green folder with Dr. Patel's report, not because it meant nothing, because it meant something I wasn't ready to answer yet. Forgiveness, I've decided, is not a door you open once and walk through. It's a room you build slowly, one honest stone at a time. Carol put down 1 stone with that letter. I put down nothing yet, but I know where the room will be when I'm ready to start. Until then, I have my garden and my grandchildren and the scholarship that will carry Raymond's name forward in a way he would have recognized as true. I have Walter, who called last week just to check in and ended up talking about Raymond for 40 minutes. I have Beverly and her occasional cake and her economy of words. I have the house, what remains of it in my life, which is the memories made inside it, which no deed transfer could ever touch. I have 63 years of a life I built with my own hands. No one signs that away. What would you do if the person you trusted most tried to take everything you built? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you choose to protect what you know is yours?